They never believed in quiet success. My parents, both high energy and obsessed with appearances, only valued what sparkled in the eyes of the world: loud accomplishments, Instagrammable moments, and Facebook brag-worthy milestones. So when I told them I was learning coding on my own during high school, they barely looked up from their phones. When I built my first mobile app and it got 20,000 downloads in a week, my dad's response was, "That's nice. Maybe you can help David with his website." Please subscribe to our channel and tell me in comments from where are you watching this video. David, the sun in their sky. My older brother was the textbook definition of overconfident and underqualified. From his teenage years, he jumped from one money-chasing idea to the next. One year, it was a custom sneaker brand. He ordered cheap shoes online and stuck stickers on them. Another year, it was luxury dog collars. And when he discovered dropshipping, the house turned into a maze of empty boxes and sample products, while he loudly claimed he'd be a millionaire in 6 months. My parents adored it all. "He's a natural-born leader," my mom would say, even as bills piled up and refund requests filled his inbox. Meanwhile, I was teaching myself Python, Java, and mobile UI/UX design between classes and part-time jobs. I didn't have a big ego or a loud mouth. I just wanted to create something that worked, something real. But every time I tried to talk about my ideas or show them what I was building, I was met with lukewarm smiles or patronizing nods. "That's great, sweetie," they'd say. "But are you sure that's a real job? Not everyone can live in front of a computer." They poured their money, time, and attention into David's ventures, even when they failed spectacularly. He took out loans in their name. They co-signed business credit cards. He got custom merchandise made before building a customer base. And every single time he crashed and burned, they'd host family dinners to cheer him up. "Entrepreneurship is about risk," Dad would say over stakes. "You can't win if you're scared to lose." When David's online course about passive income failed to sell a single subscription, they said the market just wasn't ready for his genius. All the while, I was quietly building a reputation. I took on freelance projects, bug fixes for small apps, e-commerce site builds, back-end integrations, and over time, I built a portfolio and a client list. I wasn't making millions, but I was making steady money, and more importantly, I was learning. When I landed my first big client, a mid-sized U.S. software company looking to outsource app development, I used the money to launch a small but official business. I rented a shared office space, hired a part-time designer, and rebranded under my own agency name. Still, I didn't say a word at home. Why bother? At family gatherings, no one asked what I was working on. They asked how David's latest hustle was going. Even when I saw his product getting review bombed online or knew he had missed a rent payment, I kept quiet. I was tired of defending myself in a home where failure with swagger was more respected than quiet growth. Then one Christmas, everything became clear. David announced yet another launch, some AI-powered branding tool that scraped Canva templates. He printed shirts with his company name, made a presentation in the living room, and handed out branded pens like he was Elon Musk. My parents were thrilled. They even offered to mortgage part of the house to help him scale. And me? I had just landed a 6-figure contract and was finalizing the paperwork to open a second office in another city. I didn't tell anyone. What finally cracked me wasn't David's arrogance. It was my parents' willful blindness. One night, I overheard my mother on the phone with a family friend. "We're so proud of David. He's always thinking big. Our younger one, well, she just plays on the computer. It's not a real job, you know?" I sat in the hallway, stunned. I was providing full-time salaries for 3 employees. I was running a registered business. I had clients in 5 countries. But to her, I was just playing on a computer. That night, I made a decision. If they didn't want to see what I was capable of, then I'd show them another way, something they couldn't ignore. And life, in its poetic way, handed me the perfect opportunity. David's business collapsed within 6 months. Again. But this time, the damage was bigger: legal threats, unpaid vendors, and burned investor bridges. He became unemployable, his credit tanked, He had to move back into our parents' house and started sending out desperate job applications. One of them ended up on my desk. He didn't know. He had no idea who the hiring manager was. He just knew the company was in his field, well-paying, and listed remote work. When I opened the email and saw his name, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. My parents thought I was just playing on a computer. But I was about to play chess. I didn't hire him immediately. No, I let the application sit for a few days. I wanted him to wonder, to feel that pit in his stomach, the one I had lived with for years in my own house, wondering if I mattered, if I'd ever be seen, if anyone would take me seriously. When I finally called him in for an interview through one of my managers, not directly, he didn't recognize the company name. It was under a brand we'd acquired 6 months earlier. When he joined the Zoom call, his face was tired. Not the smug, overconfident David I grew up with. This was someone who'd been knocked down and finally stayed down. His voice cracked when he spoke about past ventures and lessons learned. He looked desperate, humble, almost human. I didn't join the first interview, but I watched the recording, and I made a decision. He was qualified, barely, but I wasn't hiring him because I needed his skill set. I was hiring him because I wanted to give him a taste of what it felt like to be invisible, to be underestimated, to be dependent on someone who would never brag about it. He got the job. Entry level, low pay, 3-month probation. He called our parents that night to tell them the good news, and I happened to be over for dinner. My mom was overjoyed, gushing about how proud she was of him for getting back on his feet. Dad raised a glass and said, "He's turning it around. Always lands on his feet, that one." They didn't ask how my company was doing. Again, I leaned back in my chair and sipped my wine. David started working under my project lead, an incredibly sharp woman who had zero patience for excuses. She didn't know he was my brother. To her, he was just another junior developer who needed training, reminders, and a lot of slack nudges to meet deadlines. I watched as his usual tricks, charm, over-promising, talking big, fell flat. Here, results spoke louder than stories. A month in, he asked for a raise. My manager forwarded the request to me. I declined. 2 months in, he submitted subpar work on a client project and got called out publicly in a team meeting. He stayed quiet. No jokes, no excuses. Just nodded, said he'd fix it. And he did. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. By the end of his probation, he was improving. Slowly. But he still didn't know who was signing his paychecks. Until the day of the company retreat. We held an annual event, half work, half celebration, where teams gathered in person for strategy sessions, bonding, and announcements. David walked into the room and froze when he saw the banners, my company's logo, my name on the welcome screen. His jaw tightened. He looked around, confused. When I stepped on stage to open the retreat with a short speech, his eyes locked on mine. I didn't acknowledge him directly, just spoke to the team, thanked them for their hard work, announced our expansion into another market, and teased a few big contracts we had recently landed. When I walked off stage, he was waiting in the hallway. You're the CEO?" he asked, stunned. "Yes," I said, "for almost 3 years now." He stared at me, emotions flashing across his face. Shock, confusion, something close to shame. "Why didn't you tell me?" I smiled. "You didn't ask." He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just nodded and walked away. That night, he sat alone during dinner, quieter than I'd ever seen him. The next week, I called him into my office. I told him I knew about every failed venture, every lie to investors, every time he'd stolen our parents' attention like a spotlight was his birthright, and that I still gave him a job, not out of pity, but to give him a chance to rebuild. He didn't defend himself. He just said, "I didn't know how much damage I did. To you. I didn't see it." I let him sit in that silence. Then I offered him something unexpected. A promotion, not because he was brilliant, but because he was learning humility. Because for the first time in his life, he was working for something, not trying to fake his way into a shortcut. And because I believed in redemption, not just punishment. When our parents eventually found out I was his boss, their reactions were mixed. My mom tried to save face. "We always knew you were smart, sweetie." My dad just said, "You should have told us." I didn't respond, because I didn't need to tell them anything. They could finally see it with their own eyes. And honestly, that was the best revenge. A quiet, powerful, undeniable success story, built from every brick they threw at me. And now, those bricks formed the foundation beneath someone else's feet.